It's doing the signet surge.
Kind of an interesting location. Now I understand when people say in the back of a Walmart parking lot. Not sure if the machines or the dispensers themselves are derated a little, but clearly not getting the 350 as promised. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm excited to announce that I'm going to be taking my first ever all-electric EV road trip here in the 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 6, and I want to bring you guys along for the ride, show you my first-hand experience. Again, I've never taken an EV road trip, never really gone more than across town in an EV, and today we're going to be maxing out the range on this Ioniq 6, but I think I am going to purposely stop at a DC fast charge station just to get the overall experience, how it is to public DC fast charge, and experience everything that the EV road trip lifestyle has to offer. So make sure you guys stay tuned for this one. I think it's going to be a very interesting video, and I can't wait to bring you guys along. So now you guys might be wondering what this road trip is for. Well, this is for the Mama Spring Rally. It's essentially a Midwest Press Automotive Association. They hold a spring and fall rally every year from my understanding. And the spring rally is up in Road America near Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. And that's roughly 260 to 270 miles from my current location. So it's really not that far. And technically it is all within the electric range on this rear wheel drive Ioniq 6 Limited. However, like I said, I am going to be purposely stopping at an Electrify America station, I think on the east side, or I guess west side, I don't know, somewhere around the Milwaukee area, just to get a feel for how the experience is at public DC fast chargers. Again, even though I wouldn't really have to stop if there was a good level 2 or a good DC fast charger up near the Road America track itself. And if you guys have been subscribed to the channel and follow along with some of my content, then you'll actually recognize this Ioniq 6 because it is the exact same one that I featured just a few months ago, not only doing a full walk around on it, but also doing a side-by-side comparison to the Ioniq 5. So if you guys are interested in that video, make sure to check it out, but this will give me a good experience with the all-new Ioniq 6. Likes, dislikes, the overall driving dynamics, how it feels on a road trip, how quiet it is, testing out all the driver assistance technologies. But let's not waste any more time. We need to get on the road. I think it's about a 2 hour and 45-minute drive up to that Electrify America DC fast charger, and then it's also like another 50-60 miles up there to Road America. So I'll go ahead and insert the clip of me yesterday charging this vehicle up to 100% in preparation for this road trip. But you can see we're sitting at 96% state of charge with an estimated range of 299 miles. Like I mentioned, the trip up there to the Road America track itself is actually like 270 from my actual location. So again, I really, in theory, shouldn't need to stop and charge, but we're going to use the recommended charging station that the Mama Press Association provided. It is an Electrify America. Now, unfortunately, this car is not set up, or my account is not set up for the free DC fast charging that this car is inclusive with, but I will be go ahead and paying for it through the app, just experiencing how the charging works. So as we begin to come up on this truck, one thing I really do like about the Highway Drive Assist 2 and the driver instrument gauge cluster here is, well, you can see the vehicle way ahead, like way back. It'll start to show up as a little car inside of the actual truck itself. But here we do the automated lane change. Tell me to keep my hands on the steering wheel, which they are. And yeah, it's just an effortless pass, but you can see the dynamic display in the center with Highway Drive Assist 2 equipped vehicles. It'll actually show a little blob, a little rectangle here as we pass on the right side of the display. There you can see it. Now, it would be cool if it was a little bit more accurate in the shape and size of the vehicle rather than just a blob, no matter if you're passing a car, truck, minivan. So as you guys can see, we are actually closing in on well under a 50-mile difference between the estimated range from the Ioniq 6 and the actual distance according to Google Maps. We're at 45% state of charge. It is interesting to see how this gap is starting to close as we decrease the state of charge of the battery pack. I have not changed really my speed or anything much at all, so it's been very consistent in that regard, but 78 miles, 126 estimated range. So if anything, that means I might decrease my speed here, maybe down to like 70, 71, or I might just stick it out and see how much of an excess we have according to the vehicle itself. and then just kind of determine where to go from here. I'm still very comfortable that we will make it. I'm just not as confident in the greater than 10% state of charge, I guess you can say. Okay, so we are just closing in on 40 miles according to Google Maps, and the car 73 miles at 28% state of charge. So definitely interesting to see how we are losing ground on our surplus of estimated range according to the vehicle. So now we're down to 31 miles of surplus when we were at, I think we hit 80 briefly for a second, but we were in the 70s for most part until we hit about 45% state of charge. So as we get closer, it should be a little bit slower of speeds. I think it is a couple miles off of the interstate. So I might have to start slowing down anyway at that rate, which should net me some better range with the battery percentage that I have left. So unfortunately, I just pulled up and I erased the trip information, but it was just over 200 total miles. You can see 3.3 miles per kilowatt hour, arrived at 14% state of charge. And yeah, we're just gonna plug it in. They did find the 350 kilowatt station over here. Not sure if you guys can see it or not, but it is the one on the other side. So I'll just pull the cable around. But yeah, let's go ahead and get it plugged in, charging, and a mini EV also showed up at the exact same time, but otherwise the station itself was empty. It's doing the signet surge. You can see it is jumping all around there, and that's just something to do with the 800 volt architecture of the Ioniq 6 and some of the other EVs on the market. But nonetheless, we'll see if it sorts itself out after we get just a little bit of additional state of charge in the battery and the voltage comes up. But nonetheless, a little bit disappointing for my first experience. It says we're currently pulling 145 kilowatts steady. So I'm not sure if it just changed since I just walked over here, because we are gaining state of charge and battery voltage, but we'll have to see how long this takes. But I would say on a 350 kilowatt charger, that is not ideal given the conditions of this session, but nonetheless, I'll take it. If it's truly pulling 146, we should be out of here in less than a half hour like I expected, 23 minutes to 80%. So run in, use the bathroom, and we'll see where we're at when we come back out. And another thing to consider at these units is that these are paid by the minute up here in Wisconsin. Back in Illinois, they're actually paid by the kilowatt hours. So if the machine is not dispensing as quickly as you would hope, then that means that you are paying more for the same amount of energy. We are still pulling 120 kilowatts. It is stepping down just a little bit right here at 80%. Just under $9 for a 24-minute session thus far. So we'll have to see. I will probably go just a little bit above the 80% mark given the uncertainty with the area, where we are going and stuff like that. Not sure how much we're going to be driving. I really don't think much at all, but nonetheless, better to be safe than sorry. We're still over 100 kilowatt hours at 81%. So I'll probably give it another 4 or 5% or something. Then we'll go ahead and wrap up this session. But that is just something to consider at the pay per minute rather than pay per kilowatt hours. You are getting charged more the more time you spend here. I am fairly satisfied with the overall charge time. You can see 25 minutes, $9.25. We're still right around the 100 kilowatt mark at 82%. Put in 57 kilowatt hours into the battery pack itself. Started at 14% state of charge. Here we are at 82. Like I said, I'll let it go just a little bit longer since we're still getting decent speeds and I'm not in a rush per se. It is only 3:30. Definitely have plenty of time to get up there and kind of take my time, but this is an interesting first experience nonetheless, given that we are at the typical EA Walmart location here on the west side of Milwaukee. Only one other person was here right when I pulled in. They pulled in the exact same time I did, but outside of that, nobody else has been here. Which is a little bit interesting, but I'll definitely have to do a rate my charge with the out of spec channel and Kyle Connor over there, because I think that is fairly important to note that there was signet surge here on these signet units. So I'm just going to run it out till 30 minutes or 90%, whichever comes first. I'm sure they'll hit pretty much at the exact same time here. Pulling 50 kilowatts, there we go. right at 30 minutes. We'll see if we can eke it up to the 90% mark really quick before we get billed for the next minute. Went from 14% to 90% state of charge. And again, there's a grace period, but I don't think there's any idling fees or anything like that. So we'll go ahead and unplug it. And that is a wrap of the 2023 Mama Spring Rally, and this begins the second half of the EV road trip video. Back to where I came from, obviously. We're beginning the trip back at 48% state of charge. The car is saying 121 miles of estimated range, and the EA station that I stopped at on the way up says is about 60 miles away, so I'm well within the range of that, and I want to see if there's anything, maybe that's just a little bit further than that, because by the time I get there, it's currently 140. I could be pushing, you know, after a half-hour charging session, rush hour traffic once again, and that was not good. That was no good. So I want to see if there's anything just a little bit farther away, maybe just out of town, even if it's slightly slower charging speeds. So I've gone ahead and looked around. There is one in Madison if I wanted to take that route back to the Quad Cities. That one's about 81 miles away, it said, which I think I could make it to that one fairly easily or without much worry. And of course, there's the Rockford one, which is even further away. I think it's just around 100 miles from my current location, and that one would certainly be a stretch even if I could make it there. So I think the plan is I'm just going to stop back at the Walmart location that I used to come up here, charge up to at least 90%. Give myself just a little bit of buffer to make it back to the QC, and then once I'm back there, of course, that's not an issue. But overall, had a fun time at the Mama 2023 Rally, and definitely be back. And I think there are some other events later this year, late summer, early fall, that might be a little bit closer, maybe in the Joliet Autobahn area. We'll have to wait and see on that. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and head to the EA station and see if we bump into anyone else this time and not be the only one charging. So just to give you guys the trip information before I turn the car off, 58.6 miles, 1 hour, 17 minutes, 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour, which is actually, I think, better than I averaged on the way up here. However, I was traveling lower speeds for at least half the distance. So as a whole, not too bad, 27% state of charge, as you can see. Let's go ahead and plug in and see how it goes. Successful initiation. Let's see what kind of speeds we get right away. Looks to be peaking out at 121 so far. We'll have to see if that increases at all. It is nice test time though. We do have a Bolt over there on one of the 150s, and of course a Rivian over here to the left on the 350 that I used on the first thing, but nonetheless we are getting still 129-ish on this vehicle in this dispenser. So we'll have to see how the charge session goes, but overall, given this is a 350 dispenser, I would say that we are not having a perfect charge, but you know, 130 at the end of the day isn't the end of the world. Just a few more minutes stuck here at the charging station, and then we'll be on our way. But it looks like if everything goes to plan, we should be here equal or less time than the first stop, which would be awesome. And since I went to the bathroom not too long ago, really nothing to do here but just wait. And here you can see the pixel LED lights on the steering wheel. Also show you that you are charging by pulsating the rough 25% increment that you're on. You can see we're just over 1/4%, so it's flashing that second pixel there. And one thing I just thought of while watching it creep up to 150 kilowatts here is that, oh, there it goes, starting the signet surge right at 40%, which is a little strange. Bouncing between 70 to 150. We should still be here equal or less time than the last charge session. It started out pretty good, a little bit slow in the speeds, but as you can see, we are now surging. And now it's getting busy. We have a F-150 Lightning. It looks like the Pro model back there. We also had a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV plug-in. Well, I lied about being a shorter charge session. This is going to be pretty much identical to the last one. I think I'm going to stop it right at 30 minutes. Just because I don't think the speeds is conducive to staying here, and I think I'll make it with plenty, especially with the Milwaukee traffic, which is terrible. I'll go ahead and stop it right at 30 minutes once again. Should be the same amount of money as last time, which is right around $11. 92%, should be good to go. 250 miles right on the rated range. So as you guys saw, I made it back without any issues, and I just wanted to wrap up this video and give you my final thoughts and opinions. The trip went fairly smoothly overall. I did put an additional 10 to 15 minutes in beforehand, looking up the location, seeing where it was at, just inputting it into Google Maps or anything like that. And with a traditional ICE car or gas-powered vehicle, you really wouldn't have to think about going on a road trip at all. Pretty much set your end destination in Google or your navigation system, hit the road, and find a gas station at pretty much any exit. If you need to fill up, that is, most gas cars anymore get at least 400 miles on a tank. So in this case, I really wouldn't have needed to fill up until I was on the way back. But nonetheless, gas stations are plentiful where EV chargers generally are not. Now, I will say when it comes to the charger location in this particular case, a lot of EA stations or Electrify America are at Walmart or Sam's Club, which in this case was true. It was at a Walmart parking lot, and it really wasn't located directly off the interstate where most gas stations are and where it would be most convenient. So in terms of the actual drive distance to the charger off the interstate, I would say at a bare minimum, it was about 5 to 7 minutes one direction and another 5 to 7 minutes back to the interstate before we could continue on the trip itself. So I think that was a little inconvenient in my regard, especially when you factor in the Milwaukee traffic. So I really was bumper to bumper traffic for a little while in both directions. But I would say it added a minimum of maybe 10 minutes in a perfect scenario each way, getting to and from the charge location from the outside of the interstate. And when it comes to the total charge time that was actually sitting plugged into the charger itself, as we saw, it was 30 minutes each time, or 1 hour total. So when you factor that into the actual drive time out of the interstate to the charger, you're looking at 40 to 45 minutes each charge session. By the time you take the detour, do your 30-minute charging sessions, anything else you need to do. So really, I would say it was about 45 minutes each session total, including the actual drive time to get to the charger location itself, which really, it wasn't that long, but you could tell it was a little bit longer and you had a little bit more free time than filling up at the gas station, say on the side of the interstate on a road trip, even including a bathroom and snack break, which I could all do in that 30-minute charge session, so that was really not a problem. But versus that of a normal traditional gas station stop where you basically fill up your tank in 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever it is, run and use the bathroom after you're done filling up, and pretty much hit the road in under 15 minutes or so. Now, if I would have gotten ideal charging speeds, it would have been down to maybe 20 minutes sitting actually plugged into the charging station itself, versus the Signet surge I was experiencing and all the other just slower speeds of the DC fast chargers. So I would say in ideal circumstances, you could get this down by another 10 to 15 minutes, depending on your state of charge that you're starting with and the state of charge that you want to end with. So I will say this was a little bit on the longer side for ideal conditions, but nonetheless, it should be, roughly 20 minutes plugged into actual charge in most cases. And speaking of that Signet surge, I won't go into the exact details because personally, I actually don't know the exact reason behind it, but it's either a software or hardware compatibility issue with the DC fast charge dispensers with certain makes and models of EVs. I believe it is more prone for the higher voltage EVs such as the Ioniq 5, Ioniq 6, all the eGMP platform vehicles from Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, which are based on an 800 volt architecture. But nonetheless, it basically varies the charge speed or charge rate extremely quickly, bounces up and down between 50 kilowatts all the way up to like 150 kilowatts. It just varies it for a short time, then it will eventually level out, pick a charge speed, and then as we saw in my first charge session, Signet surge happened at least twice, if not 3 times, while I was inside the store actually going to the bathroom. So yeah, it's just a problem that really impacts certain EVs more than others. and it needs to be fixed and addressed because it certainly slows down the charge speeds as a whole when it's varying it, and I'm sure it's not good for the battery and the actual vehicle itself. So that's definitely something I want to see addressed ASAP. Only applies to the Signet hardware at the Electrify America stations. And I don't believe it affects the ABB or any of the other hardware manufacturers, but this is only related to the Signet hardware, hence the Signet Surge name. And in addition to the Signet Surge, I believe there might have been a speed limitation even on the 350 kilowatt dispensers, because the max I saw was 150 for both of the two charging sessions. So even at 14% stated charge, plugging in with the Ioniq 6 under these conditions, I really would have liked to have seen over 200 kilowatts, and I believe that would have been a reasonable expectation had everything been working properly. Ambient air temps were like upper 70s, around 80 degrees, so battery wasn't really cold or anything like that. The stated charge is at 14%, which I think is in the curve where you'll see over 200 kilowatts of peak charge speed. So nonetheless, the speeds seem to be limited, but I don't know for sure if it was just related to the Signet Surge. Going back to the location of this particular charger, it was fine. It was at a Walmart parking lot. There was a couple fast food places across the parking lot, easily walk to. There was an auto parts store across the parking lot and a few other items as well, in addition to Walmart itself. So it really wasn't a bad location per se, just physical location in relation to the interstate was my biggest issue. As a whole, this was one of the largest EA stations that I've personally ever seen. This was a large city and really the only one in the Milwaukee area, so it does make sense. But most EA stations that I have experience with, just looking on YouTube videos and also driving by them in person, typically there are only 4 dispensers, so it was nice to see a fairly large station like this one. Now, the last thing I want to discuss is the efficiency and range estimates of the Ioniq 6 itself, because I did mention a few things earlier on in this video that I just want to clarify, because I realized after looking and editing the video itself that there might be some discrepancies or people might have misunderstood what I was saying inside of the video itself. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the range estimate on the digital cluster of the Ioniq 6 was pretty far off from the actual range, or decreased over time during my travel to the charger itself. So there's 2 reasons for this, I do believe. Now, one, the estimated range is probably based on past driving history and efficiency with the vehicle itself. And the average is probably somewhere around 4 miles per kilowatt hour, maybe just a little bit higher than that. And obviously driving on the interstate at speeds over 70 miles an hour, you're not going to get 4 miles per kilowatt hour, although we weren't far off. But nonetheless, the car itself did adjust over time as we were getting closer and it was getting more efficiency data and everything like that. And I will say, because I didn't use the onboard navigation inside of the Ioniq 6, this might be one of the reasons why the car was so far off in terms of the excess buffer that we were going to have or should have had when we arrived at the charger itself. I think if I would have inputted into the onboard navigation instead of using Google Maps, it would have been a more accurate range number accounting for the interstate or highway speeds, but that's just my guess. I don't know that for sure, but I do know it does take into account things like that when you use the onboard navigation system. But nonetheless, it started out around 90 miles of excess range or a buffer when we should have arrived at the charger, and it dropped down to about 36 miles of extra range when we got to the charger, or about 14% state of charge. Again, that was just based on the past driving we did. I just wanted to point that out because I did mention that a couple times earlier on this video, and I did find it interesting though that in theory, I thought we would have more range buffer than we did when we actually arrived at the charger in Milwaukee. And speaking of the efficiency and range, on my way back from Road America to the charging station itself, I did insert that clip of about 58 miles of driving, and you saw it did get 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour. And that was partially due to the fact that I was doing about 60 to 65 miles an hour instead of 70 to 75 miles an hour. So that really goes to show that if you decrease your speed, you are going to be way more efficient and potentially could extend your range on the same amount of energy or battery life, 30 or 40 miles in this case, because it said we got 0.5 miles per kilowatt hour more. Say you're using 60, 65 kilowatt hours, well, that's right there, over 30 miles of additional range in theory in a perfect situation. So if you're going to go 10 miles an hour less to get the extra efficiency, well, you're kind of equaling out or negating any benefit there because you're getting an extra 30 miles. But I will say, if you're willing to drive 10 miles an hour slower and that additional 30 to 40 miles of range gets you to your final destination where you can charge and don't have to plan out a charge stop outside of your exact drive, I think that's where the real benefit lies, rather than having to make a dedicated charge stop on the way up to your final destination. If you can make it to your final destination without using that 30 to 40 minute charge stop, I think that is really where the benefit lies, although you really wouldn't need to stop for 30 minutes. You could probably plug in for 5 or 10 minutes. But as a whole, this was a very good experience and a very good trip to get a feel for what the EV public DC fast charging and road trip experience is like right now here in the United States. Now, this was kind of one charger in the middle of nowhere because Wisconsin as a whole doesn't have a lot of Electrify America stations. Where here, we are located on I-80, which runs, east to west across the entire country, and it does have quite a few DC fast chargers, both EA and I believe some other manufacturers as well. There's actually one just like 10 or 20 miles out in Geneseo, Illinois. I'm sure some of you guys have probably stopped there to charge before if you have traveled on I-80 in an electric vehicle. But nonetheless, it depends on where you're going and how many Electrify America or just public DC fast chargers there are in a given area. But it would be much easier to make these trips if they were pretty much even half as prevalent as gas stations across the country, and you really wouldn't have to put too much effort into thinking about where you're going to stop. And with that said, I think the focus really needs to be expanding the EV public DC fast charging network and also making it more reliable rather than focusing on additional range inside most of these electric vehicles. Really, I don't see the need for 400, 500, 600 mile range electric vehicles because typically at the 3 to 3.5 hour mark, I'm going to stop, want to get out of the vehicle and stretch and take a bathroom break, get a snack, something like that. And the Ioniq 6 can do just that around 75 miles an hour. Most of my trip was spent between 73 and 74 miles an hour, so it was pretty constant in terms of the speeds. And as we saw, I got 205 miles down to about 14% of battery, starting at about 96. So this electric vehicle can pretty much do mid 70 mile an hour depending on the wind and ambient conditions. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and my real world experience with this EV road trip. Leave your comments down in the comment section below. If you have any questions, I'll go ahead and answer those. And also, I want to hear your guys' first ever EV road trip. Leave a little detailed description on how your first experience went. Maybe when it was, what year it was, because I know technology is changing rapidly. So if you took a trip in a Tesla per se, 5 years ago, that might be similar to it is now. But if you took a trip in a CCS car 5 years ago, that's probably much different than it is today. So leave your experiences and first trips down in the comment section below. Make sure to hit that like button if you guys enjoyed and or found something helpful, and subscribe if you guys are not already subscribed. And as always, hopefully you guys find some content interesting here on the channel. And as always, I hope to see you guys in the next one.